Hello, everyone. This is Chala Dinkoy, CEO and founder of The Repositioning Expert, coming to you live with another Tuesday Tea Time with Chala. I have a fly in here. Oh my God, it's a fruit fly. I tried that, the viral pot with the apple cider vinegar with the dish soap. And then, yeah, it did not work, obviously. So let me take a sip before the fruit fly gets to it. How annoying. All right. So I have been helping my clients do this for a long time, how to position on your competitor's weakness. The reason why you need to have a positioning, obviously, is to be memorable and to look different than all the other cows. I mean, the word branding started from cows because in farming, they needed to brand them with the owner's name so that they can distinguish between the cows out on the field. And that's what businesses are, is that's why they need to have a brand. And having just a name is not enough because there's just so many cows out there now. If we look at, companies and businesses, so there needs to be something different about the cow. And that's what positioning is, of course. And so with my clients, we've been doing repositioning, and that's the name of my company, for 2 decades now, almost getting close to 2 decades. I need another drink. I'm here before gym time for a change, so that's why it's so early. I'm gonna down my protein, do this, and then go out to do leg day. All right, so getting back to positioning. We've been talking to the market and getting a pulse of the state of the nation and the needs and the unmet needs and the gaps in the market of industries and prospects to do repositioning work for, as I said, almost myself approaching 2 decades. So now when I saw this, article in Inc. magazine, I wanted to represent it in this way with these very interesting, both B2B and B2C examples, because it is just another way of looking at how you can find that gap to position yourself into. And when I say the gap, it's something that is of need, but is not covered by people who are already doing what you're doing in the industry. So the lack of differentiator, as you know, is the number one reason why you can't unseat whoever's already doing kind of similar things to what you're doing in an organization that you're trying to get into. And I've been using that statistic of 86% of buyers can't really tell the difference. I've looked up that stat. We can still find the source, but there's, other numbers that say all the way down to 70% but it's a huge majority of buyers just can't tell the difference between two suppliers. So the way to differentiate yourself is through positioning. And here are some examples of how to find that positioning through looking at your competitors' weaknesses. So for example, Netflix looked at blockbusters and the things that it hated. And I'm a huge movie holic. And I used to spend almost all my weekends at Blockbusters, just standing and looking at which movie was I going to take home that day. Late fees, I don't know how much I paid in late fees. I even had, lost fees because, they claimed that I never returned it. The trip to the store, oh my God, to get in before Monday morning before work, it was such a nightmare. And then, of course, out of stock. There was a movie you wanted to see so badly, and especially it would be the ones that were like right, as they came out, they were so popular. And of course, you wouldn't be able to see them until they came back in stock. So Netflix looked at all of Blockbuster's weaknesses and it took all of the things that it could change. And then they positioned on being able to solve these problems. And as you know, it is the number one. Blockbuster's out of business, and Netflix is the number one media entertainment company in the world. Number two, this is a smaller example. A restaurant owner took his staff to a a higher ranked competitor, and they wanted to find out not what these guys were doing well, but what these guys were not doing so well. And what they came back with is, one was the coffee. Their coffee game wasn't that great. So they weren't really good with the choices and the knowledge. And then the second thing they saw was the beer, because this was such a wine centric experience and offering. And they kind of, poo pooed the beer drinkers. They, didn't mistreat them, but they were kind of dismissed. So they saw this opportunity. So right away, they implemented two things. They came up with believe it or not, a beer connoisseur on premise, which is called a sommelier, somebody who helps you with the pairing. And they also came up with a coffee sommelier. And very quickly, their rankings went from number 50 in that market to number one, believe it or not. So those are just two examples of B2C, how you can reposition based on your competitor's pain. Now, here's some B2B example. That was B2C. This is B2B. Drift, which is a marketing software, looked at, and this happened in 2016 when the CEO came on board and said, oh my gosh, we are not going to do our lead gen from our fill the form on our, as soon as you land on our webpage, fill out this form so that you can get a report, so that you can get something of value. He said, we're not going to do that. And that's how HubSpot did it. That's how everybody did it at the time. He decided that filling out the form, getting your ebook or whatever of value, and then waiting for 24 to 48 hours to contact them. By then, they didn't even remember who you were. Was the weakness of the competitive way of getting lead gen. So what he decided was, we're going to have chatbots. So right on the page live, he had chatbots responding to people who are already shopping. And I think you'll remember that the response rate or the purchase rates increase by 400% when you have chatbots, live chatbots, because they are in the energy, when the consumer's in the energy of purchasing or of interest about your company or about purchasing that service, and you contact them right away, the purchase rates go off the charts. So the result was that it worked so well that this instant access of the chatbots was, they went from a startup just new in 2016 to $1 billion company in less than 10 years. And here's another one. I heard this on a podcast that I listened to. It's called The Corner Office. And it's by Chris Corner, who's I guess he's like a serial entrepreneur, and he interviews businesses that he thinks are very clever and very entrepreneurial. So websites are designed, and I know because I've worked with designers and I've had mine designed multiple times. So how you get a website is, you give a brief to an agency, you wait for the design, you make changes, and you get the finalized version. And not only does it take a long time, I mean, recently as a couple of months ago, one of my clients was given, I think, like 4 to 6 months for development time for this website that he wanted. And so, and it's very expensive. Like his was very expensive. Now he wanted a lot of features, but it didn't matter. In the end, that's what most web design process looks like. So a company called Design Joy, so this guy who worked in design for another company, decided that he was going to take out the friction, which is like the pain point of having to wait that long and having it cost so much, but still having it be custom, because he was a custom designer. And I'm not talking about the AI kind that you can literally, click one button and design a whole website. Now, there are products and services that are amenable to that are okay to do that. But this is for the bigger, the more complex kind of websites. And he decided that he's going to do it in one day. It's going to be custom. And while he will employ AI, it's not going to be done by AI the way that the ones that are done by AI are cookie cutter. but it will be custom, and it will. And he started with a price point of 2,500. That was it. It was a flat price. Now it took off so much because he took the weakness, the competitive weakness of that time delay and the cost, and he now makes 200K a month. He became so successful that he got sick from working. He was working so hard, and he now makes 200K a month on average. And he started by sharing his product or his service on something called Product Hunt, which is you can upvote. I actually looked at it. I never knew about it, but it's mostly for software companies and for apps and new software, but it could be any other product or service. And it's a tracking of all the new products and services that are being introduced in the market, and you upvote yourself or get clients, or he got his friends and family to continue to upvote him so that he could appear on the primary ranking list. And that's how he got in. And so that's a huge success story of how to take the competitive friction and turn it into your positioning. So here are the steps to find this gap in your competitor's playbook. The first is what I usually have my clients do, which is the informational interview with your key decision makers of the target industry that you're trying to get. So the key buyers, key stakeholders, people who actually are the check signers who are going to make the decision to hire you. You want to try to find out their frustrations, the friction points, the wish list, the things that they have always accepted but never been happy about. So find that out. Another question. So the second point is ask them yourself, analyze why this persists in the market. Why is it accepted? Is it because it's always been done that way? Is it because it's too expensive to change? Is it because there's a perception that it's not that important to the customers? So find that out, because these are cues, but not facts, and they will lead you to figure out whether you can change it or not, and how easily you can change it, and then own it. And then step number 3 is look at your competitors' negative reviews. And don't look at the ones that are the ragers, the 1-star ragers. They'll always be angry about something, but look at the 2-3-star ratings, where what are the 2 or 3 things that you could fix easily that your competitors are falling down on. Now, in the RFP cycle, I teach this as trying to have a meeting with your prospect buyers mid-contract of the current incumbent, the current vendor doing the job, and you go in halfway through the contract and have a conversation or a meeting with the buyers to understand what they're not doing well, what they're not happy with. And then you bake that into your actual upcoming renewal RFP bid. So you put in exactly what they want. And I'll give you an example. You have seen Kim Insana from the marketing company, and she was able to get the actual pain point, which was the breakdown of the AI of the previous supplier. They just put it on to automatic roll, and because it was AI, it didn't give them reliable results, and nobody was keeping an eye on it. So they made that the cornerstone of their pitch. And so that's why you need to figure out what was it that the previous or the current competitor doesn't do well. And you can find that out through the reviews, or you can find that out through interviews of their current clients. And then you can also find this out from vendors who work in adjacent industries. They might have an insight because they might be hearing it from their own clients. And then, and you look at that. Once you become really ensconced in an industry, that's why you're going to be hearing about the industry issues and who is being able to fulfill all the problems, the friction, and the missing gaps, and who isn't. So that's going to give you a lot of intelligence. Now, the fourth step is you have to concept test that positioning. I don't want you to just do the research and then own it. You have to go and concept test it as a differentiator by talking to as many of your future prospects as possible by saying, if this were to be a service available, would you be interested in purchasing it for this much? I mean, this is what we used to call purchase intent, PI score. If there's no purchase intent against this concept and you're not testing it, you're just assuming it, it's not going to be a safe strategic direction. So I wouldn't want you to do anything without concept testing it. I was fortunate enough to be asked to speak at the Greater Washington Project for the Next Gen businesses, which were really young business owners and entrepreneurs who had invented services and products, and that was last week in DC. And one of the biggest fails that I've noticed in much older businesses is the lack of concept testing. There was no concept testing. There was just assumptions because they had used a service that they, didn't have satisfaction with. Then they tried to implement, and invent this circumventing solve, and without actually going out and testing it en masse, in large, and to even just anecdotally to try to gauge whether this concept tested or not, they were trying to get to market and to sell. And it just, without proof of concept, it's just not going to work with any serious buyer or investor. So please do the concept testing. And then last, once it tests and everybody says, yes, I would love that. Oh my God, where have you been all my life? Yes. Then you own the positioning through thought leadership of educating around why the problem persists and what it causes. Not how to solve it, but why the problem, what is the problem, why is it a problem, and why existing solutions are not working, and how not the exact to do of your how, because you don't want to give them the blueprint of the how, otherwise they can go and do it or copy it, but you want to give them the what, the why, and the results of being able to work with you to solve those gaps in the competitive landscape. So I hope that was helpful. I think it's a really great way of another way of looking at how you can do positioning. And you need to have a clear positioning, especially in the world of AI, because AI only recognizes thought leadership. And unless you have a very pointed and specific and focused thought leadership, you are invisible, just like before AI. You're still invisible. You only had your personality and your, Rolodex to go off of, or your networking and personal networks. And yes, those are still relevant, but because AI is now a major player in determining search and sourcing and helping, buyers to match their needs with existing suppliers in the market, you need to do a better job of positioning. So I hope that was helpful, and go watch your competitors for what they're not doing properly, and then own those weaknesses so that you can come out on top and get in. All right. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.